Hello everyone, and welcome to another Wulong build guide. The build I'll be showcasing is centered around the grace of Lingbao Tianzun the Pure One. This is a build focused on putting elemental and status debuffs on enemies. This build is quite powerful in the sense that your damage will always be amplified by not only the bonus of this set, but also by the various debuffs you have applied on an enemy. This build mainly excels against human enemies and ganks as well due to the crowd control abilities this build has, but it is also really powerful against just pretty much any boss, and I have made this build in a way that it can even beat metal virtue and fire virtue enemies, even though it specializes in using poison spells itself. For this build, you want 5 pieces with Grace of Lingbao Tianzun the Pure One, 1 equipment piece with set bonus required mitigation, you want 1 equipment piece with Grace of Xiaoha the White Emperor, and then 1 accessory has to be the silver inlay Liubo dice. The second accessory can be whatever you want, and your main weapon that you use can be whatever you want. One honorable mention is the Gooding Blade or the Drought Demon Blade as well. They scale with all of the stats this build uses, and they have some decent special effects for having 1 equipment, and also their unique skills are really good. Now I'm just going with this glaive weapon purely because I like the special unique martial art that it has, Feasting Years in. Now the special effects themselves, or more like set bonuses, are really good. This set gives you spirit vulnerability to a target upon a successful martial arts hit, power drop to a target that a wizardry spell hits, and damage amplification when landing a fatal strike. On top of this, you get increased status effect duration on enemies, which just extends all the debuffs you'll be putting on enemies. It also includes elemental debuffs, and then the crowning jewel of this set bonus is the special 6-piece bonus. It gives you increased damage. I think it's around 20% when you have 3 debuffs or more on an enemy. So not only will you have the 20% damage bonus constantly active on enemies, you will also get the benefit of all the debuffs you do. Now the other set bonuses are just Grace of Xiaoha the White Emperor for increased status effect accumulation on enemies, and then the silver inlay Liubo dice for even more status effect accumulation to enemies. Now, when it comes to special effects, I have Ice Enchant on my main weapon. It goes really well in with the build where you want to just put as many debuffs as quickly as possible on enemies. I have also increased status effect accumulation to enemies and power gain upon martial arts. Now it's not the biggest damage buff, but you'll be using martial arts quite often, so you have the power gain active pretty much constantly. On my secondary weapon I have status effect accumulation Flame Enchant. Now I don't really use this weapon that much, and it's mainly just there for the grace bonus. On my ranged weapon I have Flame Attack Power, Ice Attack Power and even more status effect accumulation. And then on my headpiece I have Slow on enemy upon wizard spell. Now this is also a really good one, because hitting an enemy with a spell, just one spell, gives them a power drop and slowness. So that's 2 debuffs already that you can apply at the start of the fight to almost have the max damage boost from the 6-piece grace bonus. Then I just have Flame Attack Power, Ice Attack Power and Poison Accumulation on enemies. On my chest piece I have Burns, Chill and Poison Accumulation and Divine Beast Gouge Gain. On my gloves I have Haste upon deflecting a critical blow. The reason I have Haste is because I already have power gain on my melee weapon and damage reduction upon deflection on my accessory. And then I just have even more Poison Accumulation and Divine Beast Gouge Gain and increased elemental damage. On my pants I have Toxin, Flame and Ice Attack Power. And then on accessories I just prioritize HP Restoration from Wizard Spell damage and HP Restoration from melee attack damage. And I got lucky with one that also have damage reduction upon deflection. Alright, so the levels I've gone with are 60 metal, 50 water and 42 in fire. This is at level 150. Metal is the main virtue, and this is for applying toxin on enemies, because when you apply toxin to an enemy, it resets the timers of all other debuffs, be it a status debuff or a elemental debuff, and the timers on the other debuffs will not tick down as long as the toxin debuff is active on the enemy. So with poison you can pretty much have all debuffs active on a boss or enemy for the entire duration of the fight. So usually you just have to apply them once. If it is a tankier boss and the fight takes a bit longer, you might have to do it a couple of times, but never more than 3 times. Water is really good on this build because fire counters metal, but water counters fire, so you just have a counter for your counter. And then fire, which counters metal, because metal enemies might be immune to poison, so he has something against those as well. And also you get decreased spirit consumption rate on martial arts and increased spirit gain rate on regular attacks. So you can use martial arts even more and keep even more pressure onto enemies. And also the damage over time if you inflict fire on an enemy goes really well hand in hand with the damage over time from poison. And just these 2 damage over time debuffs will just eat up the health of the bosses and enemies you'll be fighting. For spells you want Burning Flame Wave. This is a really good spell to apply the fire debuff, and in conjunction with HP Restoration from Wizard Spell damage, the lingering effect of the flame will give you quite good regen if enemies stand in this. So it's a nice source of regen and a really good way to inflict the fire debuff. For water spell I have Frost Lance. It is just for quick application of not only water but also the debuffs that are accompanied by spells. So slow on enemy upon wizard spell, and then the set bonus of here, power drop to the target when a wizard spell hits. And it also is really nice to chuck in between hits. So let's say if a boss jumps away from you before you inflict the water debuff on it, You can just fire a couple fast shots, and it doesn't cost any spirit to use at all. Well, it does cost spirit, but a negligible amount. And then the main two spells on this build are Venomous Discharge. Now this spell you can use early on in a mission as well. All of these can be used, which is really nice. And it's a really good spell, and it leaves well, actually several pools of poison on the ground that do quite decent damage in itself. It applies Toxin really well, and you also get regen from the damage over time if an enemy stands in the pools with the accessories Ace Restoration from Wizard Spell. So that's another source of regen. So in ganks you can just chuck these two spells and it will do good damage to every single enemy that stands in them. And then for the last spell to help with building poison is Venom Snare. Now it can sometimes be a bit hard to hit due to how slow the projectile is, and the tracking is decent but not the best, so I often like to proc or hit this spell in conjunction when I stagger an enemy with applying another status debuff. So let's say I apply water to them with some attacks, and then I follow it up with Venom Snare. Now it makes a cloud that follows the enemy that ticks them for damage constantly, and it's quite good damage that it ticks for, and it also does pretty good poison build-up. So usually just throwing this spell and hitting them with the Venom Snare is enough to proc the poison to make your debuffs stay for long. The Divine Beast you want to use is Tengshe. It has really good special effects for your build. It gives increased spirit damage dealt to enemies afflicted with negative effects. And since you will pretty much always have at least one, but most likely 3 or more negative effects on an enemy, you will always have increased spirit damage dealt to them. It has increased status effect accumulation, plus 7%, which is really nice for inflicting toxin, fire and water on enemies. Increased wizard spell damage is really nice as well, since you'll be using your spells quite a lot. Now the force special effect is completely useless on this one, because you already get it from your set bonus, the Grace one. So it is kinda useless, but the other special effects are so good for this build that it doesn't matter that one of them is completely useless. Alright, so now we are done with a rundown of the build, the special effects, set bonuses, levels, spells and everything you want to use with this build. Now I'm gonna end this video with a showcase of me fighting some bosses. I also included the Tiger's Loyal Subject submission, because I feel like it demonstrates really well the ability to crowd control with this build and the power of the damage over time that this build can inflict on enemies. Now I hope you enjoyed the video so far, and thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again in my next video. Thank you, and bye.
就让阁下见识一下何谓皇天之剑。